What's up, guys? This is Brave, and I'm back with another review of Tyler Perry's Sistas. This is Season 2, Episode 12, and the episode is titled Thinking of You. Let's go ahead and break this episode down. So we start this episode off with Maurice. He's giving Sabrina a call, to ask her what happened with Alonzo, considering he left her there. And Sabrina is like, you killed him. The police are going to show up for you and all these things. And he's, doing the typical Maurice antics. And next thing you know, there's banging on the door. And, he's kind of freaked out now because he thinks that the police are there. But lo and behold, who is it, you guys? It's Sabrina knocking at the door. Come to find out, Alonzo was not dead. He was just, passed out from getting his behind beat, as well as because of the drugs and drinking that he had done prior to getting there. So, the ambulance sent him on his way, and that was pretty much that. Sabrina is, at Maurice's apartment at this point, and she's trying to stay there. And it's like, girl, you still could have gone to your house. You have a whole apartment that you live in. Why are you showing up to Maurice's place? And also, I'm surprised she didn't sober up by then, because I'm like, girl, he left you in the middle of nowhere. And, at a certain point, that liquor should be sobering up out of you. You know what I mean? And I did actually giggle when she took that bonnet. She's like, oh, yeah, this looks like it'll fit. Because for some reason, Maurice was wearing a bonnet. And I'm like, sir, you have, no hair. But, Maurice is super extra. All right, you guys. So then we next have a scene with Aaron and Karen. They are running into Andy's apartment to see what the heck did Gary do to Andy. Because as you know, he had that phone call on the last episode saying that he did something bad to her. So they get there and Andy is still alive. She's still breathing. She's just it looks like she's sitting in a state of shock. So Karen, she tells Aaron to leave the room, and he's like, oh, well, I'm going to go call him to see, just check on Gary to see what the heck happened with him. So Karen is trying to get Andy to tell her what happened. I already know that he did something to you. What did he do? So I can't lie. Andy got on my nerves, even in this scene, just because, baby was dragging it out. And I'm just like, Karen is working really hard to try to get her to say what really happened, because Andy kept saying, nothing happened. He didn't do anything to me. And then she finally lets Karen know that Gary, he squeezed her really tight. And, of course, as we know, she couldn't breathe. And Karen, of course, is like, Andy, this is abuse. You have got to stop. So, as we even know from previous episodes, Karen did mention how, if Andy was going to try to, work things out with Gary or do whatever she's trying to do with Gary, she wasn't going to be there for the ride. But, of course, what do we see? Karen being that ride or die friend for Andy, because clearly Andy is not saying anything straight. She's literally trying to make excuses like, oh, he was just trying to hug me. He was just hugging me. And it's like, Andy, no one hugs anyone like this. And I can't lie, it's so frustrating to see her character be this attorney who's supposed to be so strong, and she's supposed to be, so this and that. But for some reason, whenever I see this whole storyline of her and Gary, it just makes me cringe, because I'm so frustrated with her. Because, I just don't understand why she lets him get away with so much. I understand her mind is warped, but at the same time, it's like, Andy, you've already been through an abusive relationship. You should have saw these signs long time ago. And honestly, I'm glad that she has Karen by her side, because Karen she's definitely taking it easy on Andy, and I don't feel like Danny would have. And I definitely don't think Sabrina should have been the person who came to rescue her, because I'm sorry, Sabrina's just very ditzy. That's just who she is. So next thing you know, Karen is like, no, we need to go to the hospital. You know what I mean? Because there needs to be some type of examination to make sure he didn't break anything. Who knows? Because Andy might be covering that up. So, of course, Andy bargains some more time. She's like, oh, just give it a day. I'm going to give him his money back. And Karen is definitely sitting there getting frustrated because she wants Andy to take this serious. She wants Andy to realize that this guy is abusive and that she needs to officially leave Gary alone. Karen is even like, do I need to pull up, the statistics of how many women are like getting abused by men? And also, like, I was there with you with the last guy who was beating on you. I can't go through this again. And honestly, I will say that I can fully support Karen in this moment, because I can only take so much just standing by being your friend. You know what I mean? Like, I can only put so much on me. But if you don't want to do better, I don't know how I can help the situation. So we then have Andy saying how, this is basically what she deserves because Gary was a married guy. Here's the thing. It takes two people to tango, and Gary knew that he was married. And then you also knew that he was married because you stuck around after the fact. Now, do I feel like her getting abused, does Andy deserve that? Not exactly, but at this point, I want her and Gary to go away. So, when it comes to Andy and this whole situation, it's just like, you're dragging this out because you want to. You make excuses for Gary because you want to. Because you know that he's not good for you. You know all these things, but you're claiming that you love him, he loves you, even though he basically almost killed you. Like, girl, get this psychotic relationship away from me. So Sabrina is like, not Sabrina, oh my gosh, Karen is like, well, you can come to my house and, you can crash there because you're not staying here. And Andy's like, no, I need a day. I've been in your house. I've been in Sabrina's house. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to be in my own bed. I'm like, okay, Andy, you're full of crap. Basically, you want Gary to come back for you at this point, because there's no way he's done all this to you and you think that you can stay at your place and he's not going to come back. Girl, he got a key. Like, what what are we talking about here? And Karen is like, no, if that's the case, I'm going to stay here then. And Andy is like, well, is that the only way I can just get one day? Just one more day? And I'm like, what is up with her this one more day? Like, does she feel like her and Gary are going to run off into the sunset? Like, I just don't get it. So Karen makes her lay down, and then she goes and has a conversation with Aaron. So Aaron just wants to know, like, what did he do to her? Like, what happened? And Karen lets him know that Gary was squeezing her, and he's like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Like, who does that? And he's going to head to the hospital to check on Gary, see what happened there, and Karen is going to stay at Andy's place. So in our next scene, we see Aaron. He's at the hospital with Gary, and they have a conversation, and Aaron is just trying to figure out, like, dude, what happened? And Gary is not exactly mentioning the whole thing that happened with Andy, more so the fact that he got into this accident and that everybody was okay. So Aaron is like, so did they know that you were drinking? Because, you could be going back to jail. And Gary's like, yeah, I'm already going back to jail. Like, he clearly does not care at all. But He then goes and asks Aaron, oh, but, can you post bail for me because I have to be at the bank first thing in the morning? And Aaron is like, yeah, I could do that. I'm sorry. I don't know what man in their right mind would post bail for somebody who just hurt someone. Like, he literally just hurt his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, whatever you want to call Andy. Like, he physically abused her, and you're saying you're going to post his bail so that he can go to the bank? Are you kidding me? Like, I don't care about Gary getting his money. He can rot in prison. Like, I just don't even understand the logic behind Aaron right now. I mean, next thing you know, Aaron is talking about let's hold hands and pray. And I'm like, Gary just almost killed this girl. He not trying to pray to God. He know that God don't want to hear from him right now. He know that God's 1 second away from striking him down because he keep doing wrong. So Gary is like, go ahead and pray by yourself. I don't want any parts of that. So Aaron leaves because he's saying he's going to go get the doctor. I'm like, what are you getting the doctor for? There's nothing wrong with Gary. He not hurt. So we finally move on from the Andy and Gary saga for a little bit, and we head on back to Sabrina and Maurice. So Sabrina is, crashing at Maurice's place, and he goes in there to wake her up like, girl, you got 2 hours before you have to go into work, and your breath smells really bad. So he ends up leaving the room because there's a knock at the door. Who's at the door, guys? Calvin. And he's like so excited, like, hey, new roomie. And I'm like, oh, of course, I completely forgot that he's supposed to move in that day. So Calvin, he pays Maurice the first and last because, of course, Maurice is like, no, your test results aren't back yet. And, he took the money. So Calvin is officially his roommate. And Maurice is like, so what'd you do last night or whatever? So Calvin is like, oh, well, I was with this girl, whatever. And then Maurice is like, nope, don't want to hear that. Don't want to hear any of that. Because then you're going to have to hear about being a guy. And Calvin is like, I don't care. And of course, Maurice is like, oh yeah, you don't. I'm sorry, but that actually was so funny because, the typical straight guy or whatever is not going to want to hear about Maurice's rendezvous. But Calvin, he's on the spectrum. So Calvin tries to talk about this thing with this girl yet again, and who decides to wake up and come out of the room? Sabrina. And baby girl came out looking busted. Okay? Like, she looks so toe up. And yes, I said she looked toe up. Like, I have not seen anybody look this rough in a while. And, she comes out the back and she's like, oh, Maurice, I'm just going to, head to work because, now she's embarrassed because she sees Calvin there. She looking raggedy. And I mean, she's basically doing like a little walk of shame, even though she didn't hook up with Maurice. But this is like super embarrassing. So once she leaves, Calvin is like, well, what is she doing here? And Maurice is like, well, she was upset about you and that girl last night or whatever. So Calvin is, talking about how she doesn't want to commit and all this stuff. And Maurice is like, both of you are acting childish, which I absolutely agree. They both like each other. They clearly care about each other. But the whole, I don't want to commit to him, like, it's honestly so random, and I just want them to have an adult conversation. I mean, one thing I will say that I loved about this scene, though, is that Maurice was actually very useful. He was very insightful. He was able to articulate and let Sabrina know, as well as Calvin know, that they both need to communicate and say what it is, because he had told Sabrina that the previous night, and he's telling Calvin this now. And I do feel like Calvin was taking in what Maurice was saying, and I think that them being roommates, that might be pretty interesting. I think that they will be great roommates. And one thing that I thought was pretty interesting was that when it was time for, Maurice to leave for work, he tells Calvin to make a copy of the key and to meet him at the bank or whatever. And Calvin's like, oh, well, I'm just going to head to my room or whatever. And here he goes with his one little duffel bag. And I'm like, sir, you mean to tell me your whole life is in this one little duffel bag? Like, where are your things? Like, I understand that Maurice had an extra room, but like, who said that he was going to let you sleep on a bed that's in there, or if there's a bed there, or like, where is, like, I don't know, if you had a whole apartment, like, where are your things? So we finally get a scene of Danni and Preston. Preston is forcing her to have breakfast because usually she probably just skips it. And she just kind of asked him, well, what do you have planned for today? And he's just describing work, doing something with some maneuver, or not maneuver, with some manure. And she's like, oh, well, I would like to see what you do. Which I found to be very interesting, because clearly she really likes this guy, because she's interested in seeing, what he actually does for work. And now their relationship is moving past just them hooking up. So next thing you know, he's like, yeah, we can do that. And she's like, well, I'm off tomorrow. And next thing you know, there's a knock at the door. Oh, who is it? The infamous Zach. He's back with Danni because he has nowhere else to go, even though he could actually go to Fatima's house. I'm not understanding why he strolled through the door with his shirt open. Like, I just need for them to figure out, do they want Zach to button this shirt, or just wear it open, or just take the whole shirt off? Like, I'm just not understanding. So, as we know, Zach has nowhere to go, so he is at Danni's house because he wants to take a shower. And she's, doing the typical thing of like, oh, you must be doing something illegal or whatever. And he's like, no, it's not illegal. I just want to take a shower. And so next thing you know, she's like, well, if you plan on, trying to do something to get Karen back, you can go ahead and let that ship sail because she's moved on. And he's like, I ain't trying to do nothing for Karen. And I was like, ooh, he said that with his full chest. Like, he said that with his heart. Like, I think he's officially over Karen. He says that now he's doing things for Zach. He's doing things for himself. And, of course, Danni's like, yeah, okay. Just make sure you don't go to jail. And she basically heads out for work while he's still at her apartment. I guess going to take that shower. So we next get a scene of Andy and Karen at Andy's place. So basically they're having a conversation about what's supposed to happen when Andy goes to the bank to get this money out. Karen has the idea that she can go ahead, give the money to Karen. Karen can end all this, give that man his money, and send him on his way. Andy, of course, is like, I can't do that. Are you going to end it for me as well? And Karen is basically like, yeah, because, this situation is out of control, basically. Okay, this is so random, but am I the only one who, thinks that it's kind of cute when Karen is like, you show? Like, every time she says show instead of sure, I'm like, where is this accent coming from? I don't know. Sorry, that was super random. But Andy is saying that she is ready to end this and ready to give him back his money. And Karen is like, okay, well, let's go. So Andy is like, so I can, pretty much do this on my own. And Karen is like, I'm going to come with you, pretty much. And Andy's like, so you don't trust me? And Karen's like, nope, I trust you. I just don't trust you around a man. Which is very true. There are a lot of women who are out there that completely switch up and they change when a man is around, or if a man is even interested in them. And I know that you guys know some ladies who are like that. But anyways, so next thing you know, Andy is like, well, you're the same way too. And I have noticed that she continuously does this to Karen. Anytime that Karen tells her something about herself, she always throws it back on Karen. Like, well, you do the same thing and you're just like that as well. And like Karen says, no, but I stopped that situation. I knew that that was not a good relationship for me, and I let that man go. I mean, also, the one thing about this scene is that Andy is so adamant on her being able to go there alone. And I'm just like, girl, what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you think that Gary is going to whisk you away or something? Like, do you think that Gary is going to have like a change of heart? Like, I'm just not understanding why she's so adamant on doing this alone and completely trying to shut out Karen. Maybe because she knows that Karen is right. Alright, so we now get a scene with Sabrina at the what? The bank. And Jacoby ends up coming in. He looks like he's all disheveled because he's running late. And Sabrina lets him know, like, no, you're good. You're on time. Or whatever. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So she gives him, his report back, and he ends up giving her a rose, and, he's really polite about it, like, oh, it's because you've been really nice to me, or whatever. And as we all know, we can tell he has his eyes on Sabrina. He clearly likes her. And, she's super awkward about receiving a flower. And so, to kind of make it not awkward, he's like, oh, there's the bear over there. And he's talking about Maurice, because we know that Maurice has definitely been growling at him lately. So, she's like, oh, he's not that bad, whatever. And, like, next thing you know, there's, like, this awkward silence between them. And, like, honestly, I feel like the silent moment lasted a bit too long in this scene for me. Because then she's like, oh, you can get started working. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is really random. And to make matters even more random, Jacoby ends up asking Sabrina out on a date. And I mean, it was a very awkward way to ask. Like, it didn't seem like he was comfortable. She was uncomfortable. It was like, okay, cool. So, he asks her out to dinner, and she's like, how old are you? And I'm like, girl, didn't you, like, look at all his stuff, like, when he was logging in or paperwork or something? Like, I feel like she probably would have known how old he was before. But maybe not. And he didn't answer the question. He's like, why does that matter? And she's like, let's keep things professional. Because, of course, at the end of the day, Calvin is probably still on her mind, even though she has Jacoby, who's extremely fine, sitting in front of her face. So he agrees, that they're just going to keep it professional. Next thing you know, Sabrina gives him back the rose. I'm like, girl, you didn't have to do that much, but okay. And he was clearly embarrassed. I felt kind of bad for Jacoby. I mean, he walked away and was like, I'm just going to, head over this way with my tail tucked between my legs, because he was super embarrassed. I felt really bad for him. But next thing you know, as he's walking away, of course, Maurice walks up. So Maurice is being what? nosy. He's trying to figure out why is Jacoby giving Sabrina a flower, and he's also, doing his whole spiel about how Jacoby's trying to take his job, and it's like, boy, ain't nobody trying to take your job. Like, it's only 2.5 people who work at this bank. Y'all only get about 1 or 2 customers probably a day. Relax. All right, so who decides to walk into the bank, you guys? Not Gary, not Aaron, not Karen. I mean, not even Andy yet. Who do we see? Alonzo. So Alonzo comes in, and he's basically begging at this point for Maurice to drop the hate crime charge, because he's saying that he can lose everything, and how he's been to therapy, he's been to counseling, he's done all these things. And Maurice is like, no ma'am, I'm not doing that. I'm not dropping these charges for you. And another thing is that I did a coma for you, because as we all know, Maurice was in the hospital for a minute. Maurice was in a coma behind this fight. I wouldn't even call it a fight. Him being attacked by Alonzo. And honestly, throughout this scene, I was all here for it. However, I could not with Sabrina in the background, in the shadows of like, she was 5 seconds away from saying, tell him, Maurice, tell him. I'm like, I don't need your ad-libs, girl. So out of nowhere, here comes Jacoby running up like a fangirl. He's like, oh, Alonzo, hey man, what's up? I can help you, whatever. And Alonzo's like, nah, I gotta go, whatever. So Alonzo leaves, and, after he leaves, Sabrina's like, how do you know him? And Jacoby's like, everybody knows Alonzo. Like, I just know him from around the city. So then we have Sabrina saying, he's the guy who beat up Maurice. And, Jacoby is like, really? Like, he basically didn't believe that it was Alonzo, because, again, he knows a different version of Alonzo. He doesn't know this aggressive, homophobic version of Alonzo. So, Maurice is like, he's like, I'm a diva, whatever, after Jacoby is like, I'm sorry that happened to you. So he leaves, and Sabrina tells Jacoby that Alonzo he's not welcome there at the bank. And next thing you know, who comes in? Aaron and Gary. And I'm like, first of all, where did Gary get a whole suit from? Because he ain't got no home. He just got out of jail. And, like, whose closet is that from? Like, is he wearing Aaron's clothes? Like, he could have came in some jeans and a t-shirt. Like, I don't think he needed a full suit, knowing that all he was doing was collecting his money and he about to get on. So Sabrina is pretty much like, so what y'all doing here? And Aaron, he's being the mouthpiece. He's saying, we're waiting to meet up with Andy, and have you seen her yet, or whatever? And she's like, no, or whatever. And what's this guy, Gary? Gary's like, well, she better be here. And Sabrina took offense to it. And I'm like, girl, let this man get his money so he can get on. So Aaron basically asked Sabrina to call Andy to see where she is, because, as we all know, Gary in his anger was starting to act up at the bank. He was starting to get a little aggressive. And Sabrina goes and calls Andy, and she's trying to ask all these questions. And Andy is like, I'll tell you when I get there. Which, I mean, it makes sense to leave Sabrina in the dark, because she's a bit too ditzy to comprehend anything. So next thing you know, Sabrina calls Karen, because she knows if she calls Karen, she will find out more information. And Karen is like, I'm walking in the door right now. And they end up going into the office when Karen gets there. And I just want to point out one thing. It really drives me nuts on this show when they're pretending to dial a phone number. When I'm just like, no one dials phone numbers that are saved in their phone. Like, at this point, can you guys like pretend to scroll or something, because I don't know, it just really bothers me. So anyways, while they're in this room, Sabrina's like, so what's going on? What's happening? And Karen is like, I'm going to let Andy tell you. And, Sabrina has an attitude. She's like, this is what Danny be talking about with you two because y'all always keep it secrets. And, Karen is like, I'm just going to go ahead and let her tell you, basically she's taking a standpoint of, it's not my place to tell you what's happening with Andy. But Sabrina definitely has a point, because these ladies always keep information from Danny and Sabrina, and it's because they are not that close. I feel like they are friends with Sabrina and Danny, kind of, not out of guilt exactly, but like, I feel like they treat them like they're less than, so they don't feel like they're on the same level or the same page as them, if that makes sense. Like, because, Sabrina only works at a bank and Danny is just like somebody who works at the airport. Like, they don't have real careers. Like, Karen is a business owner. You have Andy, who is an attorney, and like these other girls are kind of on the struggle side. And even when it comes to the type of men that they're dating, they're on two different levels. For example, you have Karen. Of course, she did have Zach, but now she done moved on up to Aaron, who he has his head on straight. He got some money in his pocket. Andy was interested in I wouldn't even mention her in Paris, because he cleaned the building for for a living. But Gary was a man of stature. Like, Gary had whatever type of career that he was clearly making some type of money, versus Sabrina dating Calvin, who we don't even remember what he does for a living, but we do know that he has all these weird kinks about him, and I think the girls look down on that. As well as Danny, she finally got a man, and it's some white boy that she calls Rodeo, and he's like a cowboy. So I feel like they just feel like they are above these ladies. So Sabrina is like, you know what? I'm going to call Danny. And not Andy, Jesus Christ, these girls' names. Karen is like, what are you doing that for? And, Sabrina still ends up calling her. And Danny's on her way to work. But Sabrina's like, no, I need you to come to the bank because all these people are here. And basically she don't know what's going on. And she's like, wait, Karen's there too? And she's like, yep, she's standing right in front of my face. And Danny's like, she's going to show up, clearly. She's irritated, but she also says, these girls, they're always holding out on us. So I kind of feel like there's going to be like some division of this friendship at some point. So Karen has like a really quick conversation with Aaron. They didn't really talk about much. What's this guy named Maurice? He comes around and talks to Sabrina, like, what is going on? Like, I can tell that there's going to be some drama up in here. And Andy finally arrives. So when Andy finally arrives, Sabrina's like, what's going on? And I'm like, Sabrina, if you cannot put the context clues together to figure out that she's coming to give this man his money back, like, how are you not comprehending that? So, Andy is like, okay, yeah, I can just go get it. And Gary is like, no, I'm going with you. And Karen's like, no, you're not doing that. And I'm like, well, it's not like he will be going back there by himself. Clearly, Sabrina would have to go back there. Andy would have to go back there, as well as Gary going back there. He's like, well, I have to see, if it's all of my money, which I'm like, okay, I understand. And then next thing you know, you have Danny showing up in this same work outfit that she been wearing since the first episode. And then I don't know where Jacoby comes from the back. And I'm like, what is this circle of life friendship happening in the center of the bank? So when Jacoby comes by, he's trying to offer them some type of banking things, trying to get them to open up an account or whatever. And all you hear is Maurice. He's like, Jacqueline, get away from these people and go mind your business. Oh my gosh, I thought that was so funny that I'm calling him Jacqueline. I know it's not right, but it reminded me of Girlfriends when Tony would always say Jabari's name wrong. Y'all remember that? So next thing you know, all four ladies go to the back, and Andy finally has to confess and say what happened with Gary. So she tells them, how he was telling her that he loved her, and that he was hugging her and he was squeezing her. And next thing Sabrina's like, how is he squeezing you? Typical Sabrina. And next thing Karen's like, well, she has a bruised rib. And I'm like, I'm sorry, when did Andy go to the hospital? When did Andy go to the doctor? How do we know she has an actual bruised rib? Someone please let me know. So next thing the ladies are having a come to Jesus sister girl moment after Andy says that she's going to leave Gary alone. And, Danny, of course, points out that, I am just having a problem with the fact that you are still in love with a guy who treats you like crap. And the one thing about this scene that kind of bothered me is that these girls are still going to go back to the same way that they've been treating each other. Andy and Karen are still going to think that they're above Danny and Sabrina. As the season continues, I can just feel it. I just wish that there was a separation at some point, that these two groups would fall out. Now that would be interesting. Whew, y'all, this review is pretty long, but the ending was basically Gary giving a whole speech of how he loved Andy so much and how it just kind of turned into all this hoopla, and how he should have just left Jasmine for her. He goes out of the bank and Andy is there boo-hoo crying or whatever. And that's pretty much how the episode ends. I am ready to see the next episode. Let me know what you guys thought of the episode. Go ahead and like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, guys, bye.